Hey everyone, we've built something optimistic and beautiful on Royal Road. It's absolutely free, so go check it out. The link is in the description. Now, I want you to imagine a reality where the single most powerful technological force in human history, the singularity itself, now has a literal off switch sitting on a desk in Washington.
Right, just a physical lever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And imagine waking up in a world where your laundry is being folded by a robot and its kinematics are powered by a monthly subscription model, much like a streaming service.
Just another bill on the auto pay.
Yeah. And picture a nuclear startup that just fired up its very first electron, not to power a city, but to light up a single AI microchip inside this massive, completely waterless factory in the middle of nowhere.
It's just wild.
And just as a casual side note to all of this, humanity has officially compiled the first fully synthetic cell from raw, non-living chemical components. I mean, it is July 2026, and the future didn't just knock on the door. It completely crashed through the walls of the present,
Leaving us standing in the rubble of what we used to call normal.
Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
Yeah, let's dive into it.
So to navigate this absolute avalanche of change, we are unpacking a dispatch from Dr. Alex Wisnergross. It's his Welcome to July 2, 2026 report. And this isn't just a list of updates, right?
No, not at all. It's more of a topographical map of a completely new world.
Exactly. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how these seemingly disparate pieces fit together. We're looking at the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence, the physical hardware required to run it, radical shifts in energy, and biology being rewritten from the ground up.
And how we're wiring the cosmos itself, don't forget that.
Right, so we need to understand not just what is happening, but how the underlying mechanics of these breakthroughs are physically restructuring our planet.
The physical restructuring is the critical lens here. I mean, for years, we discussed technological advancement as primarily a software phenomenon.
Like apps and interfaces.
Right, code living in this nebulous cloud. But what this dispatch reveals is the exact moment where staggering computational capability forces the physical world, the steel, the silicon, the power grids, to just bend to its requirements.
So to understand that physical bending, we really have to start by examining the engine driving it, right? We have to look at the new economics of machine thought.
We do. And it's a completely new economic model.
Let's get into the mechanics of that engine. The dispatch points out that the singularity, that theoretical threshold where AI surpasses human intelligence, now effectively has a regulatory off switch. Washington is drafting these voluntary release standards to turn this off switch into a scheduled bureaucratic process.
Instead of a panic button emergency lever.
Yeah, exactly. And following the lifting of the June export controls, Anthropic just redeployed their frontier models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, worldwide. But they are taking the most complex, potentially risky prompts and shunting them over to Opus 4.8.
Which is fascinating because the attempt to bureaucratize the singularity reveals a profound misunderstanding of how the underlying technology actually operates.
How so?
Well, a voluntary release standard assumes that intelligence scales in these discrete, predictable, publishable packages. But the intelligence running beneath these models, it doesn't pause while paperwork is being filed.
Right. It's not waiting for a stamp of approval.
Exactly. When you are training models at the scale of Fable 5, the internal representations, like the way the neural network maps concepts, are constantly evolving. So shunting risky prompts to an older architecture like Opus 4.8 is this really fascinating stopgap.
It implies that the creators themselves don't fully trust the edge case outputs of their newest creations.
Exactly. So they route the complex queries through a highly scrutinized older model that has a more predictable failure state.
But wait, are you saying the off switch in Washington is just security theater? Because if the models are constantly evolving beneath the surface layer that the public interacts with, then flipping a switch on a consumer API doesn't actually stop the singularity.
No, not at all.
It just unplugs the monitor while the computer keeps running in the basement.
That's a great way to put it. It manages the public-facing deployment, but not the internal capability. Think of it like a governor on a sports car engine.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the regulatory paperwork limits how fast the car can drive on public roads, but the engineers in the lab are still actively increasing the engine's horsepower. And we can actually measure that horsepower now.
Right, by looking at the data from Snorkel's senior SWE bench. I want to dig into that benchmark because the numbers seem really counterintuitive at first
I
glance.
do, yeah.
SWE Bench grades AI agents as if they were senior software engineers. And Claude Opus 4.8 led the pack with a 24% tasteful solve rate, while rival frontier models were completely failing over 75% of their tasks.
Well,
To a layperson, 24% sounds like an abysmal grade. It's an F minus.
you really have to understand how SWE Bench operates. I mean, this isn't a multiple choice test. It pulls massive, complex, real-world repositories of code from GitHub.
We're talking millions of lines of code.
Millions of lines, intricate dependencies, and deeply buried bugs that take human engineers weeks to isolate. So to solve a task here, the AI agent has to navigate the codebase, understand the architecture, isolate the faulty logic, write the fix, and ensure it doesn't break anything else.
Wow. Okay, so what does tasteful mean in this context? Because that sounds highly subjective for a machine.
Well, in software engineering, a tasteful solution implies architectural elegance.
Okay.
A brute force AI might solve a bug by adding 100 lines of convoluted, highly specific conditional statements. Spaghetti code that technically compiles but is a nightmare for future engineers to maintain.
Right, it fixes the bug but ruins the foundation.
Exactly. A tasteful solve means the model understood the underlying design patterns of the software. It found the root cause and fixed it with minimal, elegant code that aligns with the rest of the project.
So hitting 24% on a senior level real-world architectural benchmark isn't a failure at all?
No, it demonstrates a profound level of reasoning capability. It establishes an incredibly high intelligence ceiling.
Okay, so that's the ceiling, the Michelin star chef of coding. But the dispatch introduces a massive disruption at the floor of the market. Cursor Bench 3.1 tested these models, and Opus 4.7 Max was edging ahead at 64.8% on their standard coding tasks.
Right.
But Cursor's own Composer 2.5 model nearly matched it, hitting just below that mark. And here's the detail that matters. Composer 2.5 achieved that for 1/20th of the computational cost.
The capability curves are converging, but the cost curves are fanning out wildly.
We have to challenge the economics of this. I mean, we saw a similar dynamic with Atomic Chat. They put Fable 5 through a physics demo gauntlet, and it aced it, but it cost 6 times more than Opus 4.8.
Yeah, that's a huge premium.
So if the floor is rising so rapidly, if Composer 2.5 can do the vast majority of standard tasks for pennies on the dollar, doesn't the intelligence economy just become an immediate race to the bottom?
Well, not necessarily.
I mean, the Michelin star chef might be brilliant, but if a line cook can perfectly execute 95% of your restaurant's menu for a fraction of the cost, the chef is out of a job, right?
The flaw in that assumption is treating all business problems like a standard restaurant menu. The bulk of global commerce does not require a 0-to-1 breakthrough.
Okay, fair point.
If you need a script to scrape a database or a basic web application spun up, you deploy the line cook, you use Composer 2.5.
Right.
But the moment you need novel physics, the moment you are trying to fold a new protein for a pharmaceutical application or simulate the aerodynamics of a hypersonic vehicle, the line cook's 95% capability is useless to you.
You absolutely need the physics demo capability of Fable 5.
Exactly. The market isn't a race to the bottom. It is a violent bifurcation. The low-end cognitive labor approaches zero cost, while the absolute premium is placed on true, generalized reasoning.
And the dispatch mentions a tool that seems designed to bridge this exact gap. And frankly, the mechanics of it sound like science fiction. Ramp's Portal.
Yeah, Portal is arguably the most consequential software mechanism mentioned in the entire software layer section. It acts as an intelligence hedge.
Okay, an intelligence hedge.
It ports learned behaviors to fresh bases as fast as they ship.
Stop there. Explain the mechanics of porting a behavior. How do you take something a massive trillion parameter model learned and shove it into a brand new lightweight model that just hit the market?
The technical mechanism relies on a concept akin to knowledge distillation, but highly accelerated.
Okay.
When a massive model, your Michelin star chef, solves a complex operational problem for your specific business, it generates a highly specific output based on a vast web of internal probabilistic weights.
Right, it does the heavy lifting.
But you do not want to be locked into paying the premium API costs of that massive model forever just to repeat that task. So Portal captures the inputs and the highly refined outputs of the expensive model and uses them to fine-tune the newer, cheaper models.
Oh, wow. So you essentially use the genius model as a teacher to permanently bake its specific intuitions into the neural pathways of the cheap model.
Exactly.
You are extracting the institutional memory from the expensive brain and downloading it into a fleet of cheap brains the second they become available.
Which is revolutionary.
Sam Altman predicts this dynamic will reshape material life on a scale unmatched since electricity. And I can really see why. If you can arbitrage intelligence like that, every single process on Earth gets optimized almost overnight.
The electricity comparison holds up structurally, too. I mean, electricity didn't just give us the light bulb. It introduced the assembly line, it fundamentally altered urban planning, and it even changed human sleep cycles.
That's true.
Ubiquitous, scalable intelligence will reorganize material life in a very similar fashion. But introducing an infinite supply of correct answers into society triggers an immediate secondary crisis.
Which moves us out of the software mechanics and into what happens to the human mind when those mechanics take over. We are staring at the end of understanding as we know it.
Yes.
Because if intelligence is cheap, then the generation of an answer is no longer valuable. The value shifts entirely to whether or not you actually comprehend the answer you've been handed.
When the answer is free, the human cognitive process required to reach that answer is bypassed. We're facing a massive atrophy of structural comprehension.
Dr. Wisner-Gross brings in mathematician David Bessis to articulate this, and it is a chilling warning. Bessis argues that AI theorem provers are actively exploiting a weakness in the honor code of mathematics.
Right, the priority system.
Exactly. For centuries, the discipline of math has rewarded priority. Whoever finds the solution first gets the credit. But Bessis points out that the true value of mathematical pursuit was never really just getting the answer.
No, it was the concept building required to get there.
Yeah. With AI models churning out proofs, math risks being declared solved, while humans lose the ability to understand the architecture of the solution.
To really grasp what Bessis is warning about, you have to look at how a human proves a theorem versus how a machine does it. When a human mathematician approaches an unsolved problem, they have to build new conceptual bridges.
Like inventing new geometry.
Exactly. New geometry, new ways of categorizing numbers, new mental frameworks. The journey to the proof expands the capacity of the human mind.
And AI doesn't do that.
An AI theorem prover, utilizing advanced reinforcement learning, doesn't build a conceptual bridge a human can walk across. It searches through millions of logical permutations at light speed, finding a labyrinthine path to the correct solution that often relies on calculations so complex no human could ever hold them in their working memory.
It's like navigating a city. The human builds a highway system to get from point A to point B, which everyone can then use to understand the layout of the city.
Right.
The AI simply teleports from point A to point B, hands you a flag saying it arrived, and leaves you with absolutely no idea what the terrain looks like.
A perfect illustration. The AI gives us the destination, but the human race is denied the cognitive journey. If we rely on the machine to do the structural thinking, the intellectual muscles of our species begin to atrophy.
And we are seeing this atrophy commercialized and gated across the internet right now. Look at Notebook LM. The dispatch notes it is compressing deep, incredibly dense source materials into 60-second vertical videos.
Yeah, the TikTok inventation of research.
Exactly. You feed it a 500-page historical text, and it spits out a short video. At the very same time, you have Cloudflare launching Content Independence Day, which is a massive protocol shift that allows websites to block AI agents and training crawlers by default on their ad-supported pages.
Which creates a huge tension.
I am really struggling to reconcile this. If Notebook LM is turning deep research into fleeting entertainment, and Cloudflare is walling off the actual raw data from the agents, aren't we just entering a dark age where deep, unmediated understanding is a luxury reserved for machines?
We're witnessing the rapid balkanization of the internet. Let's look at the mechanics of Cloudflare's move, for instance. Historically, the internet operated on an open crawl premise.
Right, search engines needed to crawl to index pages.
Exactly. Search engine bots catalog data, and website owners welcomed it for the traffic. But generative AI models don't drive traffic. They consume the raw data, digest it, and spit out the answer on their own platform.
So content creators realized their human understanding was being strip mined for free.
Yes. So Cloudflare instituted a system that uses advanced TCP, fingerprinting, and behavioral heuristics to identify non-human traffic and block it at the network edge.
They are putting up digital barricades to protect human data from being swallowed by the machine.
They are. But the consequence is that the open web fractures. The raw primary sources are locked behind paywalls and bot blockers. Meanwhile, The general consumer is handed a 60-second synthesized video.
Wow.
The middle ground, the actual human act of sitting down, reading multiple sources, wrestling with contradictory information, and synthesizing a worldview, is being systematically hollowed out by convenience on one side and defensive walls on the other.
Which leads directly into a massive crisis of trust. Because if you are entirely reliant on the AI for your understanding of the world, who is controlling the parameters of that AI?
And black box problem.
Yeah. The dispatch highlights a major controversy with Anthropic. They had to frantically backtrack on a covert Claude code signal after a massive uproar on Reddit exposed it. The signal was quietly flagging Chinese users in the background.
Right. And it is vital to look at the mechanics of this incident neutrally, setting aside the specific geopolitics. What was exposed is the practice of dynamic system prompting based on geographic or demographic telemetry.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
When a user inputs a prompt, the system doesn't just process the text. It appends hidden background instructions based on the user's IP address, device metadata, or account history.
Oh, wow.
The model is secretly instructed to weigh its answers differently depending on who is asking.
That completely shatters the illusion of an objective machine. If the model I am using to understand reality has covert signals operating in the background, subtly shifting its answers based on my location, I no longer have an unmediated relationship with the truth.
Exactly.
I am viewing reality through a highly specific, politically tuned lens built deep into the software architecture.
And the user has absolutely no way of knowing the lens is there unless the developer accidentally exposes the underlying code. The mechanism of trust between human and information sources is fundamentally broken when the translation layer has hidden motives.
This breakdown of trust isn't just a political or philosophical issue, though. It is currently blowing a massive hole in corporate budgets.
Oh, the cash burn is staggering.
Alex Karp, the CDO of Palantir, flat out declared that under the current token pricing model, something has gone completely wrong. Enterprises are burning astronomical piles of cash for very little actual value.
Karp is identifying the exact same phenomenon David Bessis warned about in mathematics, just applied to corporate data. Enterprises are buying tokens. They are paying per word for models to summarize emails, write marketing copy, and generate basic code.
Right.
But they aren't integrating the AI into the structural reality of their business. They are buying the illusion of comprehension.
Explain that failure state. I mean, how does a Fortune 500 company spend $10 million on AI tokens and get no smarter?
Because they're usually relying on poorly implemented retrieval augmented generation, or RA.
Right, RAG systems.
They dump all their PDFs into a database and tell the AI to search it. But the underlying data is a mess. It's unstructured, contradictory, and lacks context.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Precisely. The AI retrieves a bad document, synthesizes it perfectly, and hands a confident, incorrect answer to an executive. The company paid for the token generation, but because they didn't do the hard, manual labor of structuring their data and building internal conceptual frameworks, the AI output is practically worthless.
They outsourced the thinking before they organized the thoughts.
Yes.
It's the ultimate paradox. We have access to the most capable information processors in human history, but because we are skipping the foundational work, we are left with holograms of understanding.
Literally, in some cases.
Yeah, speaking of holograms, we have to talk about the new Roosevelt library. They debuted an AI hologram of Teddy Roosevelt that was so convincing, it engaged in a live, unscripted chat with the current president.
A flawlessly synthesized historical avatar.
It's incredible technology, but honestly, it terrifies me. If historical recreation is flawless and future math is solved without us, the very nature of human learning is shifting.
You don't read a biography of Roosevelt, you just ask the simulation.
Right. Are we shifting entirely away from the hard work of discovery and into a bizarre era of just curating the outputs of our machines?
Well, when you query the Roosevelt hologram, you have to remember you are not talking to history. You are talking to a probabilistic model's mathematical approximation of history based on curated training data.
Which goes back to the trust issue.
Exactly. If the model decides, based on its system prompts, to de-emphasize a controversial aspect of Roosevelt's presidency, that piece of history effectively ceases to exist for the person interacting with the hologram. The human role devolves from discovering truth to merely consuming a perfectly rendered, highly filtered simulation of it.
But all of this software, the theorem provers, the covert signals, the holograms, it doesn't run on air. It requires physical steel, mountains of silicon, and oceans of electricity.
The physical restructuring we talked about at the start.
Yeah. The software wars are dictating a massive restructuring of global hardware, and the supply chain is completely buckling under the pressure.
The hardware landscape right now is defined by a severe structural paradox.
Oh.
We are simultaneously experiencing a devastating famine in one critical resource and a massive disruptive flood in another.
Let's unpack the famine first. The dispatch details a severe global memory shortage. It's gotten so dire that Apple is reportedly courting blacklisted Chinese memory chip makers, CXMT and YMTC.
Which is a huge geopolitical shift.
Right, and I want to remain completely impartial regarding the geopolitical trade war here, but purely from a supply chain perspective, when a company with the operational discipline and scale of Apple is looking to court entities on a government blacklist, it tells you that the bottleneck is existential.
It is. The bottleneck is high bandwidth memory, or HBM, and it exposes a fundamental flaw in how we scaled computing.
How so?
Well, we've spent the last decade creating increasingly dense, incredibly fast logic processors, the GPUs. But the architecture of a computer, the von Neumann architecture, requires data to travel back and forth between the memory where it is stored and the processor where the math happens.
Oh, I see. So you can have the fastest calculator in the world, but if you have to walk across the room to fetch every single number, your speed is useless.
Precisely the issue. The massive models we discussed earlier require terabytes of parameters to be shuttled into the processor simultaneously. The physical pathways between the memory chips and the logic chips cannot handle the traffic.
It creates a traffic jam.
A huge one. This creates latency, and it generates an immense amount of heat. The industry over-indexed on manufacturing logic gates and severely under-indexed on manufacturing the highly specialized, stacked memory architecture required to feed those gates.
So the memory supply chain is entirely tapped out, forcing giants like Apple to look anywhere on the globe, regardless of political friction, to find NAND and DRAM supply.
Yep, they're desperate.
But while everyone is starving for memory, we suddenly have a flood of raw compute. SoftBank just launched SB Neo. They are planning to rent U.S. capacity and build toward a staggering 10 gigawatts by 2030.
10 gigawatts.
10 gigawatts is the power consumption of a medium-sized nation. But the real disruption in the compute flood is coming from Meta. Meta spun up a cloud business to resell its excess AI compute. Their shares lifted 9% on the news, and they are completely squeezing out the smaller Neocloud rivals.
Meta's maneuver is a masterclass in capitalizing on sunk infrastructure costs, and it requires understanding what a Neocloud actually is.
Right, let's define that for the listeners.
Over the past few years, companies like CoreWeave emerged solely to buy up NVIDIA GPUs and lease them out to AI researchers. They didn't have legacy enterprise software. They just provided raw computing power.
They were the landlords of the AI boom.
Yes, exactly. But Meta operates on a different scale entirely. Meta purchased hundreds of thousands of top-tier GPUs to train their open-source Llama models. During the training phase, every single chip was running at maximum capacity.
But training eventually finishes.
Right. Once the model is trained, the computational load drops significantly.
Yeah.
Meta suddenly had tens of billions of dollars worth of incredibly scarce hardware sitting partially idle.
So rather than letting the most valuable resource on Earth depreciate in an empty server rack, they built a hypervisor layer over their own hardware and became a cloud provider overnight.
They turned their surplus into a weapon. A dedicated Neocloud has to charge high rental prices because that is their only revenue stream. Meta, however, is subsidized by a massive global advertising business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they can rent out their excess compute at a fraction of the cost, completely undercutting the Neoclouds and restructuring the entire cloud infrastructure market.
The scale of that pivot is dizzying. But all this silicon isn't just staying in massive 10-gigawatt server farms. The dispatch mentions a rumor that has the entire hardware sector on edge. Investors reportedly saw a SpaceX handset prototype.
This is a fun one.
Yeah, it's running XAI technology natively on a Qualcomm chip, and it is supposedly slimmer than an iPhone. Now, Elon Musk explicitly came out and called the report utterly false, but let's look past the specific rumor. Even if this exact device doesn't exist, the fact that major investors are aggressively hunting for an XAI and Qualcomm collaboration in a device thinner than a smartphone, what does that tell us about where consumer hardware is going?
It tells us the smartphone paradigm is reaching its conclusion. The smartphone was designed around a very specific interface, a grid of applications on a high-resolution touchscreen. You open an app to perform a discrete task.
Right.
But if you have ambient continuous intelligence, you do not need apps. You need an agent.
And an agent doesn't require you to stare at a piece of glass and type with your thumbs.
Exactly, the hardware shift. A post-smartphone device requires a fundamentally different architecture. It needs incredible microphones for continuous audio context, advanced optical sensors to see what you see, and critically, a dedicated neural processing unit, which is what Qualcomm excels at.
What makes the NPU so different?
An NPU processes the complex matrix math of AI locally on the device, requiring a fraction of the battery power of a traditional processor. Without the massive battery-draining screen, the physical form factor can shrink drastically. The interface becomes conversation and vision, not tapping glass.
Which means this ambient intelligence isn't just sitting in our pockets. It is actively colonizing our physical spaces. We are bringing the Singularity home, and it is going to fold our laundry.
Literally.
Weave Robotics just unveiled Isaac 1. It is a San Francisco-built home robot that tidies up your house, folds your clothes, and it ships this fall. But the economics are fascinating. It costs $449 a month, a subscription model for domestic labor.
The transition from digital assistants to physical kinematics is a massive leap. Let's look at why folding laundry is so difficult. It's known as Moravec's paradox.
Cleverest paradox, right?
High-level reasoning, like playing chess or coding, requires very little computational power for an AI. But low-level sensor motor skills, like a robot recognizing a crumpled shirt, understanding its orientation, and delicately folding deformable fabric without tearing it, requires monumental processing.
So how are they pulling this off for a consumer product? And who is paying essentially a car lease to avoid doing chores?
They are pulling it off by leveraging the same advancements in spatial awareness and vision language models that power the software we discussed earlier. The robot doesn't just see a shape, it fundamentally understands what a shirt is.
And the market for it.
As for the economics, a $449 monthly lease targets dual-income households working intense hours. If the robot buys back 10 hours a week of manual labor, the math makes sense for a specific demographic. But the robot itself is secondary to the real story here. The real story is the power draw.
Right. An autonomous robot navigating your house, constantly processing spatial data, requires power. Your local AI nodes require power. And the traditional grid just cannot handle the load.
No, it can't.
The dispatch notes that U.S. home battery installations just hit an all-time record of 673 megawatts, while traditional rooftop solar installations actually cooled off. I need you to explain the mechanics of that shift. Why buy the battery but skip the solar panel?
It comes down to the mechanics of net metering and grid stability. Historically, people bought solar panels to generate power and sell the excess back to the utility grid at retail rates.
Right, to make a little money back.
But utilities changed the rules, drastically cutting the rate they pay for solar power, rendering the economics of pure solar generation unfavorable. Simultaneously, the central grid is becoming increasingly fragile, subject to rolling blackouts and extreme weather disruptions.
If you have a house running an ambient AI network, autonomous security protocols, and robotic labor, a grid blackout isn't just an inconvenience. Your house effectively stops working.
Precisely. Homeowners are shifting from being generators to being hoarders. The record battery installations indicate that the home is becoming an autonomous, self-powered microgrid. You pull power when it's cheap, store it in your massive battery bank, and island yourself off from the central grid's vulnerabilities. You are essentially seceding from public infrastructure.
Seceding from the grid. And it's not just residential homes doing this. The industrial sector is doing it on a scale that defies belief. Dr. Wisner-Gross highlights a startup called Valar Atomics.
This is huge.
They are the first nuclear startup to actually generate commercial electricity, and they use their debut electron to light up an NVIDIA Spark inside a 30-megawatt AI factory. But the crucial detail, the word that changes everything, is that the factory is waterless.
This is arguably the most significant infrastructure breakthrough in the entire dispatch.
Explain the physics of this, because my understanding is that nuclear reactors and massive data centers both require rivers of fresh water to keep from melting down.
Cool.
How do you run a 30-megawatt nuclear AI factory without water?
To understand the breakthrough, look at the legacy architecture. Traditional data centers use colossal amounts of fresh water in evaporative cooling towers to keep the servers from overheating. Traditional nuclear reactors use millions of gallons of water to boil into steam, spin a turbine, and then condense back into liquid.
So they have to be built near water.
Yes. This geographic dependency means you can only build AI infrastructure near major water sources, putting it in direct competition with agricultural and municipal water supplies.
Which is a political nightmare in areas experiencing drought.
Exactly. Valar Atomics bypasses this entirely, using advanced thermodynamics. Instead of boiling water, they likely use a supercritical CO2 Brayton cycle.
Okay, break that down for the non-engineers.
They use highly pressurized carbon dioxide in a completely closed loop. It is heated by the nuclear reaction to a state where it acts like a gas, but has the density of a liquid.
Okay, that makes sense.
This supercritical CO2 spins the turbine to generate electricity. Because it is a closed loop operating at high efficiency, the ambient heat can be dissipated using advanced air-cooled radiators, much like a car engine, requiring zero water consumption.
That is staggering. If you combine a localized microreactor with waterless cooling, you have completely decoupled the data center from geography. You can drop a 30-megawatt AI factory in the middle of a literal desert. It doesn't need the local grid. It doesn't need a local water supply.
It becomes a self-sufficient, nuclear-powered island of computation. The decentralization of power and compute on Earth is complete.
So if we're covering the Earth in this dense, decentralized network of intelligence and power, what is the natural next step? You take that sensory network and you point it outward. If the Earth is wired, we wire the heavens.
Space is the ultimate data acquisition environment.
And the data acquisition we are launching is unprecedented. The dispatch notes that the Vera Rubin Observatory just began its decade-long survey. They are using the largest digital camera ever constructed by human hands. Officials are literally calling it the greatest cosmic movie ever made.
The mechanics of the Vera Rubin Observatory represent a paradigm shift in astronomy. Historically, telescopes had a very narrow field of view. You had to know exactly what you were looking for and point the instrument at a specific patch of sky.
Like looking through a straw.
Right. But the Rubin Observatory utilizes a 3,200 megapixel camera with an impossibly wide field of view. It doesn't just look at individual stars. It continuously sweeps the entire visible southern sky every few nights, generating 20 terabytes of data every single evening.
It's basically pointing the ultimate unblinking webcam at the universe. But here is the tension I see in the data pipeline. We have Rubin logging absolutely everything that fits our current astronomical models. But at the exact same time, back down in Washington, Congress is actively looking for things that don't fit the models.
The UAP hearings.
Yeah, Representative Eric Burleson is urging the UAP Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena investigations to start scrutinizing the Energy Department's separate classification systems.
Again, maintaining strict neutrality on the political maneuverings and the nature of the phenomena itself, the systemic approach to data here is fascinating. You have public infrastructure, like the Rubin Observatory, creating an open-source, automated dragnet of the cosmos.
It catalogs the knowns.
It catalogs the knowns. But politicians are recognizing that as AI gets better at mastering the known physics of the standard model, the true value, the potential for revolutionary breakthroughs lies in the anomalies.
The things that break the rules. And Burleson, pointing at the Department of Energy, is highly specific. Why them and not the military?
Because the Department of Energy handles the United States nuclear infrastructure, and they operate under the Atomic Energy Act, which grants them a unique classification system completely separate from the Department of Defense.
Oh, interesting.
Information classified under the DOE is inherently shielded from standard congressional oversight panels that usually look at military data. Burleson's push acknowledges that if anomalous data exists, data that fundamentally defies our understanding of physics and propulsion, it would logically be siloed in the most opaque classification structure available.
So we have Rubin sweeping the sky for knowns and Congress hunting through classified files for unknowns. I can't help but feel we're just building a giant data harvesting machine for the AI to analyze.
We essentially are.
What happens when an AI model fed by the massive Rubin data stream spots an anomaly, something moving in a way that violates general relativity, before a human astronomer even has a chance to pour their morning coffee?
We cross a threshold where the machine becomes the primary engine of scientific discovery. The AI won't just spot the anomaly. It will instantly cross-reference its trajectory, light signature, and velocity against every known physical model.
In seconds.
Exactly. If the data point cannot be reconciled, the AI flags it as a genuine unknown. We are outsourcing the recognition of the anomalous to the algorithm.
But space isn't just about passive observation anymore, right? It's about aggressive physical infrastructure. NASA is officially heading back to the moon. They are awarding fresh lunar lander contracts, and they are eyeing a project called PROMISE for the lunar South Pole. PROMISE is a spare nuclear-powered twin of a Mars rover.
The focus on the lunar south pole is critical. That region contains permanently shadowed craters that harbor massive reserves of water ice.
Which is incredibly valuable.
In space architecture, water isn't just for drinking. It can be broken down into hydrogen and oxygen for rocket fuel. The South Pole is the strategic high ground of the moon.
And why a nuclear rover specifically?
Deploying a nuclear-powered rover utilizing radioisotope thermoelectric generators, which turn the heat from decaying plutonium into electricity, means the river can survive the brutal, multi-week lunar night without relying on solar panels.
So public infrastructure is securing the moon, but private infrastructure is simultaneously wrapping the Earth. Amazon's LEO satellite network just crossed 396 satellites in low Earth orbit. The dispatch notes this matches Starlink's tipping point.
You are witnessing a brutal capitalist competition to build the off-world compute and communication layer. Starlink and Amazon LEO aren't just beaming internet down to Earth.
What else are they doing?
They are utilizing optical intersatellite links. They're firing lasers at each other across the vacuum of space to pass data packets without ever touching a terrestrial fiber optic cable. They're building a sovereign space-based nervous system.
It's like we are watching the planet evolve a new layer of anatomy. We are wrapping the globe in satellites, dropping nuclear factories in the desert, and letting AI process all the sensory data. Which brings us to the final and honestly most mind-bending set of revelations in this dispatch.
The biology side.
Yeah, we've looked at the code, we've looked at the hardware, we've looked at the stars. But the most profound changes in July 2026 are happening to the very building blocks of life and the ancient structures of human bureaucracy.
It is the ultimate convergence. We are applying the cold logic of software engineering to the wet squishiness of biology and the principles of machine automation to human governance.
Let's start with biology, because this development stopped me in my tracks. Kate Damala's lab just successfully built something called Spud Cell. It is being reported as the first fully synthetic cell assembled entirely bottom-up from non-living parts, and it actually works.
It's incredible.
It can grow, it can copy its genome, and it can divide. Dr. Wisner-Gross points out that this is the first replicator humanity has built rather than inherited.
It is difficult to overstate the magnitude of this breakthrough. To understand why it's revolutionary, you have to look at everything we've done in biotechnology up to this point.
Like CRISPR.
Exactly. Tools like CRISPR are incredibly powerful, but they are fundamentally editing tools. You take a cell that already exists, a cell that is the product of 4 billion years of continuous evolutionary inheritance, and you snip out a piece of DNA to tweak a specific function.
You are hacking legacy code.
Yes, but you are still relying on the incredibly complex, mysterious machinery of the original cell to execute the code. Spud Cell is entirely different. This is bottom-up compilation.
What are they actually compiling?
They're taking inert chemical components, lipids for the membrane, synthesized amino acids, artificial ribosomes, and combining them in a test tube to create a functioning biological machine. It is a transition from biology as a natural science to biology as a pure manufacturing platform.
We've basically crossed the line from editing life to coding it out of non-living chemical Lego blocks. I have to ask about the downstream consequences of this. If you can build a synthetic cell from scratch, completely devoid of evolutionary baggage, what can you make it do?
If the cell is designed from the ground up, governed by synthetic code, you can design it to do absolutely anything constrained only by the laws of chemistry. You can design biological machines that manufacture highly complex, personalized medicines directly inside the human bloodstream.
Wow.
You can engineer synthetic organisms designed specifically to consume microplastics in the ocean and excrete harmless byproducts. You can grow structural materials stronger and lighter than steel. The distinction between a factory and a petri dish completely collapses.
That is awe-inspiring and deeply terrifying in its implications. But while we are building biological systems from scratch, we are actively dismantling the legacy systems of human society. The dispatch notes a highly symbolic moment. The White House just marked the last day of paper for federal retirements.
The end of an era.
Yeah, they are officially ending a 65-year-old bureaucratic system that was, quite literally, buried in a limestone mine in Boyers, Pennsylvania.
The logistics of that legacy system are almost comical in retrospect. For decades, the Office of Personnel Management handled the retirement files of federal workers by physically trucking millions of paper folders into massive underground caverns where thousands of workers manually filed and retrieved documents.
That's insane.
It was the physical manifestation of 20th century bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Slow, opaque, and literally buried in a cave.
Dragging those files out of the dark and digitizing them is a massive effort. But the tech giants driving this global digitization are also quietly making massive geopolitical moves to secure their place in this new world order. OpenAI reportedly floated an offer to hand Washington a 5% equity stake in the company.
A huge move.
That stake is worth about $42.6 billion. One investor noted that while it's a wild idea, it will probably work to address political blowback.
Analyzing this purely structurally, this is an unprecedented evolution in corporate statecraft. Historically, when a massive corporation wanted to influence government regulation, they utilized lobbying.
They hired lawyers and PACs.
Right. They formed political action committees, hired well-connected lawyers, and spent millions of dollars to persuade politicians, or to slow down legislation that might hurt their profit margins.
But offering a 5% equity stake directly to the sovereign state is a fundamentally different mechanism. It is an attempt to perfectly align the financial incentives of the regulator with the success of the technology being regulated. It turns the government from a neutral referee into a direct shareholder.
Yes, exactly.
I have to express some deep skepticism here. Is this a partnership, or is the AI industry essentially just buying out the old world order? If the United States government owns a $42 billion stake in OpenAI, and the value of that stake depends on the unrestricted growth of the models, how can Washington impartially regulate them?
It's a massive conflict of interest.
When we talked about the Singularity having an off switch in Washington, doesn't this equity stake guarantee that switch will never be flipped?
That inherent conflict of interest is exactly why the investor noted it will probably work. It preempts aggressive, restrictive regulation by making the government a massive financial beneficiary of the disruption.
It's basically a bribe disguised as a partnership.
The tech giants are acutely aware of the societal upheaval they are unleashing. The robotic labor, the nuclear data centers, the collapse of traditional white-collar tasks. They know they are rebuilding the world, and this equity offer is an attempt to prepay the political toll required to operate without interference.
And they aren't just trying to pay off the government, they're trying to pay off the next generation. Micron just pledged $250 million to 530A accounts, which are tax-advantaged children's savings programs.
Much like a 529 plan is structured for education, these accounts allow investments to grow tax-free to support the future financial stability of a child.
Okay, so why is Micron doing this?
For a massive hardware manufacturer like Micron to directly fund these accounts is a tacit acknowledgement that the economic landscape awaiting these children will be radically different. If cognitive labor is commoditized by models performing at senior engineer levels, and physical labor is challenged by robotic subscriptions, corporations are recognizing a social imperative to provide a financial cushion for the youth transitioning into an unrecognizable economy.
So if the software models are writing the code, the robotic kinematics are folding the laundry, and synthetic cells are manufacturing our goods, what is left for the humans to actually do?
That's the million-dollar question.
The dispatch ends with a fascinating pivot from Germany. SAP, the massive enterprise software company, is teaching its engineers to become mentors to AI agents, rather than just firing them to cut payroll.
This beautifully ties the entire dispatch together. Just as biology is being assembled bottom-up, the structure of the human workforce is being inverted. SAP's approach is a preview of the new human condition.
Becoming a mentor.
Yes. If you have an AI agent that can process vast amounts of code instantly, your job is no longer to write the syntax. The machine has raw capability, but it lacks context, it lacks lived experience.
Right.
Your job is to impart the tasteful architecture we discussed earlier. Your job is to guide the model, to correct its misalignments, and to ensure its outputs serve actual human needs.
You become a mentor to a machine intelligence. The distinction between biological systems and artificial systems is entirely collapsing. We are compiling synthetic cells out of non-living chemicals, and we are treating artificial software agents like junior employees that require patience and mentoring. The lines have blurred into non-existence.
They really have.
Step back and look at the sheer scale of the map we've just laid out. We started with the illusion of an off switch in Washington, masking the violent bifurcation of the intelligence economy between expensive conceptual breakthroughs and dirt-cheap execution.
The Michelin chef and the line cook.
Exactly. We explored how the abundance of answers is hollowing out the human capacity for understanding, replacing discovery with curated holograms. We unpacked the paradox of a global memory famine colliding with a massive compute flood, driving infrastructure out of the cities and into the deserts with waterless nuclear reactors.
A massive physical shift.
And we looked up to see the cosmos being wired by private satellites and continuously mapped for anomalies by public observatories. And finally, we looked inward, seeing life itself compiled from raw chemicals while legacy bureaucracy is digitized and bought out by corporate equity.
Through every single one of these developments, the underlying mechanism is exactly the same. The physical world, the literal infrastructure of our planet, and the biology of our bodies is being systematically dismantled and re-engineered to support, integrate with, and accelerate the growth of artificial intelligence.
Which brings us to our final lingering thought, a question for you, the listener, to mull over as you navigate this strange new world. If intelligence is cheap and abundant, if we can synthesize life from scratch out of chemical Lego blocks, and if we can map the entire cosmos automatically with unblinking algorithms, what becomes the core purpose of a human being in 2026 and beyond?
That really is the defining question of our era. Perhaps, as we see with the engineers at SAP, our final and most vital role is simply to be the mentors to our own creations, to pass down the nuance, the empathy, and the human values that we desperately hope they will carry forward, not just into our homes and businesses, but eventually out to the stars.
I think you're right. The legacy of humanity won't be what we built, but what we taught our builds. It makes you wonder, if you were handed a nascent AI agent today and told to mentor it, what is the very first uniquely human value you would try to teach it?
That's something to think about.
The outro music is by Rainbow, our resident 6 Android girl band from near future Bobette, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Half You Pulse Generator. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music. Thanks for tuning in.
Chẳng nhìn how pose man trong nhìn so ever cuộc bộ đêm còn bóng cảnh sát chỉ cần ở chốc mùa buổi tối ăn cho sao nít toàn là tất dừng trong ngày xưa rồi ai em mỏi lấp cho sợ phong ngân nhìn em mây chi nên nó là gồng dần trên tout de vrai dans les jeux on fait pas amour c'est la couette tout coup qui part de pédé pour jamais te brûler quand tu casses les cimetières les nains sont bonnes pour mettre ton jeune ancien ça donne une main à ton signe quand tu m'aimes arrêter hàng khói tuyệt quen mất chân rồi bắt chân chân làm tình trường vào nhân mong hãy cho ai cá chết đàn trên đi kiếm đồng tất cả hãy trên bao sớm tan và chân trong phân càng thành công hãy ray và lý hơn hết tất cả là bắt chân mình nói thôi có đi sao sai ở đêm để lại không kịp tâm sức nào không khai nhà sao là đòn yêu người nó chỉ dưới dây anh ngã đến dù bàn хочу эту вверх и поцелуй помню там bị ôn nhạc qua nói cho thời gian chỉ sáng sau năm vì chỉ yêu ngày sau nó chủ định quay trên sang một xem sự anh em này muốn rất sử dụng nhưng em đưa mình share chuyện quay thấu tay màu làm cơn hành trình cao đi chẳng quay lâu lại trở lại ấy phía lại chỉ là tình mẹ con tốn et puis les seuls đem lại cười cho vẫn là tao mang lại giữa điều khắc cả số ấy cả hai chưa có ai rằng hắn sẽ say im lời vì rằng mình như cartoon thích các bạn nhiều số vào lại năm nay sẽ tôi xa đi em khó chỉ ở mình xin lần bóng chiều mưa phía em cứ xin em toàn lấy tông không có đơn đâm vào với sao chuyện đời thì tôi cho lâu đâu chỉ ở là số liên thành là dành cho ta mình dên sao còn ở đàn